Welcome everyone to Atwater Valley Community School. This is one of our community schools, one of three in Merced County that Merced County Office of Education operates. I'm Steve Gomes. I'm the Merced County Superintendent of Schools, and we are MCOE has put this on in collaboration with Barbara Reese Christensen and her husband John. We really appreciate everything that you've done to help us put this together as well. And I think that tonight is going to be a great opportunity to listen to people who have some experience in the field with the Common Core state standards and how they were developed and how they're being used. I think that tonight's discourse will be educational to all concerned. And in fact, I was making a comment earlier that if we could just get people in other areas, particularly maybe in our other parts of our government, to come together and have a discourse like this, where it's educational and have people who are experts in the field being able to give you information tonight, and so that you can see what the Common Core state standards is about, and certainly where it's going. I want to end by thanking Dr. Kathy Pond, Assistant Superintendent of Instructional Services. When Barbara and I met in my office and said we'd do this, I called her up and said, guess what, Kathy, I got something new for you to do. And she's working hard putting all this together. I also want to thank our METV studio for filming tonight. And that's the other thing I need to tell you is that what you're going to see tonight will be videotaped, and videotape, I guess, is old. That's kind of an old term, but is going to be recorded, and will be on the YouTube, and you'll be able to see that. Just go to mcoe.org. That's our website, and just follow the links, and it'll take you there. So with that, I'd like to, at this point, introduce Gary Kummer from Merced. He is going to be serving as our moderator tonight, and his day job is Special Projects Coordinator for Merced County Public Health. And I also told him I wanted to give him a plug because he's also a pastor for the First Southern Baptist Church in Madera. And I've already heard him speak a little bit. I can see why he's a pastor. And so with that, let me introduce and welcome to the podium Gary Kummer.
Well, thank you for the introduction, and good to see everyone here. It's a larger turnout than I expected. Nice to have everyone here. I think the first order of business is if we'll all stand and have a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We've had a couple of changes in who will be here today, and so if I stumble over it, I'll try not to. And so on the side over here are those who are for Common Core. And if you just raise your hand when I name your name, because I'm not sure exactly who the names fit to the person, but Joanna Conrado is a 4th grade teacher and e-teacher of the year at Belico Crescent School District. And then there's Bliss Bosch, and that's her over there, Administrator of Curriculum and Instruction, Belico Crescent School District. And then let's see, we have Nancy Brownell, and there she is, and she is the Senior Fellow, California State Board of Education. And then let's see, Sandra Stotsky is over here. Wait, let's see if I finish. Julie, I'm sorry, Julie. I'm going to leave you out there for just a minute. Julie Joseph is Math Consultant, Tulare County Office of Education Instructional Services. And now against Common Core, over here directly to my right, we have Angela Weininger, and that's her over there. She's the founder of Parents and Teachers Against Common Core Standards. And then to her left is Sandra Stotsky, Professor Emerita, CCSS Validation Committee in our English Language Arts. And to the right over there is the gentleman is R. James Milgram, Professor Emeritus, CCSS Validation Committee in Mathematics. And if you don't want to give them applause now, give me one for going through that. I'll give you the rules of the game today. It's, the forum is being conducted to inform and answer questions about Common Core. Each panelist will have 10 minutes to give their views about Common Core. The only exception is to Joanna Conrado and Bliss Bosch, because there's 4 against 3. So they have to join together. Instead of 10 minutes, they'll get 5 minutes each. They will each get 5 minutes to make time allowances equal. Cards and pencils were distributed, and I hope all of you have a card and a pencil or a pen to write a question. Later on, there will be a time when we'll say we're going to collect them. Baskets will be provided and passed through. Put your questions in the basket, and then we'll have a question and answer period. During that time, just to let you know, there will be a 1.5 minute answer to the question, and there may be another who also can jump in on the fray, and they'll be allowed to talk for 1.5 minutes also. This is not a debate, and the panelists know that they're to direct their views to you, the audience. As many questions will be answered as will be allowed. That's a common sense statement, and announcements will be made when the questions are to be collected. The panelists will answer. I already gave that 1.5 minutes. I think we're just about finished, except for the 2 ladies down there. They're 45 seconds, not 1.5 minutes, because they're joined at the hip. Toward the end of the, at the end of the question and answer period, there will be a 5-minute wrap-up for each of the panelists to present their views once more. So with that, is the timer ready over there? Okay, everything is looking good. Let's start with Nancy Brownell.
Hello, good evening. I'll try not to break your earlobes. Thank you very much for coming out on this lovely fall evening. I bring you greetings from State Board President Mike Kirst and the other members of the State Board. I am staff to the State Board, so I'm not actually on the State Board. And I think this is a perfect example of the kinds of conversations that are happening all around the state over the last 2 years. I've had the pleasure of working for the State Board on Common Core implementation and now on local control and accountability planning. And I've participated in many, many events, both in schools, in county offices, in business parks, and I think it's a very terrific time to be an educator in our state, that's for sure. It's also a critically important time for parents and students, because we really are trying to take a look at what does it mean to be an educated person in California, to prepare students to move into a world that's very different, for example, from the time that I graduated from high school. So just for purposes of context, how many of you have students in the pre-K-12 schools locally, or just raise your hand? Great. And how many of you are interested citizens about what's going on in education and perhaps don't have students? Okay, great. Well, I encourage those of you, if you're lucky enough to have grandchildren like I do, you're finding out, I have very young grandchildren. My 5-year-old grandson started kindergarten this year, and over the weekend we were decomposing mathematics, and it was thrilling to hear him as a 5-year-old talk about how he tried to solve a problem. And obviously the difficulty right now that's happening is we have children at various ages. My grandson and everybody else's grandchildren who really have this whole pre-K-12 kind of experience will be graduating with a lot more skill sets than, for example, our middle and high school students who are sort of entering in the middle here. And so how do we have to adjust what's happening in our schools in order to move them in that direction? I'm a longtime educator. I'm a native Californian. I've been in schools my whole life, essentially. And I've lived through with many colleagues that in the 70s, we were trying to say, what is it to be minimally proficient in skills and graduate from high school. That was really all we wanted high school parents, parents of high schoolers to know, that yes, your children are graduating minimally proficient in the subjects that we teach, and we wish them well going out there into college or careers or any of the choices they make. In the 80s and 90s, we began to look around the world we were all living in and saying, minimally proficient is probably not good enough for our students to lead successful lives of their choosing. So we moved into minimally proficient, proficient and advanced, right? We adopted content standards in the core subject areas beginning in 1996. We established a complete assessment system using multiple choice assessments, and we began to report to parents at each grade level 2 through 12, or 2 through 11, that students were making progress towards proficiency in the content areas. And of course, through the revision of those standards in 2009, really, many of the elected governors at that time, the elected state superintendents, and others who were making educational choices in the states came together and said, we think it makes no sense at this time in our country's history to determine that each state determines what students need to know and be able to do, and at each district in some cases, or in each state. And so they collectively came together and said, why not decide what is it that students need to know and what is it they need to be able to do, and agree on those specifics if we want to do that. And 44 states headed down that path. Well, through the wonders of democracy, some of those changes have occurred since that time, and there are states that are saying, we decided this wasn't the best thing for our students. California has stayed the course. The Common Core standards in mathematics and literacy are really built on the standards of California from 1998 in literacy and mathematics, in Massachusetts as well, and other high-performing states. So the degree to which we moved towards saying, we don't think proficient performance is good enough. We want our students to be college and career ready. And that's really the goal of all of the changes that we're undergoing in our state right now. So what that means is teachers in classrooms all over the state, along with their local communities, because through all of these changes simultaneously, the legislature and the governor determined that there ought to be much more local control. Locals need to make the best decisions for how to meet the needs of their students. And so given the common set of here's what students need to know and be able to do, the state in its responsibilities as part of their commitment to taxpayers, right, is they are moving towards the determination that an assessment system that measures much more rigor and critical thinking and the use of evidence to determine how you respond to the answers you're reading about is going to require much more than a multiple choice test, because you can't really measure rigor to the degree that we are asking students to perform only by bubbling in a few answers on a multiple choice test. While it's served us well for almost 15 years, we're ready to move on to more performance tasks, to more writing and constructed responses, as well as some multiple choice problem solving around what it is you're reading, how it is you're responding to mathematics, and of course we're close to also having the next generation science standards that we're working on what that's going to look like across the state. So for all of those reasons, the determination that in California the Common Core standards are the foundation of the content we teach in mathematics and literacy only. We also have history standards, visual and performing arts standards, science standards, health standards, career technical standards, and all of those are part of the learning experiences that each of your students and our grandchildren have as they proceed through the California school system. So on that note, the governor, the legislators have all been involved in moving this agenda forward through the representative government that we all vote for, especially tomorrow. Reminder to go to the polls. So on that note, I think my time is just about up, and we'll continue to try to answer questions about the Common Core standards.
Now, Angela Weininger.
Do I need to? Oh, okay, good. Hello, my name is Angela, and first and foremost, before being the creator of the largest Facebook group that is fighting Common Core, I am a mother, and I have 3 children. I have a senior, a sophomore, and a 7th grader, and I am also the daughter of a 40-year veteran educator. And so the other thing is that I actually sit on my local school board up north of here. And so I have a great concern about all of this in terms of what Common Core is doing, not only for my children, but for our district. Now, I'm not here representing my board in any way. It's just as an incidental that I mention that to you. When I first started learning about the Common Core, I became very, very concerned, and it was shortly after I had won my seat on my school board. It was about a year after I had gotten on the school board, and as I started to study more and more about it, I got more and more concerned. First of all, the first thing that I was concerned about was how it came into our state. I have the letter that was signed by Arnold Schwarzenegger right here in front of me that says that he was not going to allow us to get involved with the Common Core unless they were at least as good as what our standards were prior to the Common Core standards. The funny thing about it is that he signed us up to get involved in all of this before the standards were even completely written and released for public viewing. I have a concern about that because our state school board at the time decided to sign on to it after only having about 3 to 6 months to look them over and decide that that's what they wanted to do and that they were actually better than what we had. I don't think that that's really sufficient amount of time to determine that our standards were less than what the Common Core standards were. And so I have a great concern about that. I also have a very big concern about the fact that this is going to cost our districts a lot of money to implement and our state to implement. And I have documents here that try to give us a breakdown because it was never given as a breakdown before we decided to sign on to it, is that a minimal estimate of $1.6 billion for this state to implement the Common Core standards. That's a lot of money. And especially when we have been in a lot of hurt as far as money goes, that is a big concern. And as a school board member, I have major concerns with that because that means that our district has to do a lot of shuffling around, which is why we have now the LCFF and the LCAP, because it frees up that money to better implement the Common Core standards. And so I have some concerns about that in that regard. Now, as a mother, and because I have so many people, I have 21,000 people on my Facebook page, and it's growing every day. And there are people from all over the nation, parents and teachers, who are extremely concerned and upset with what they're having to deal with in terms of the Common Core. And so I hear a lot of stories. I read a lot of stories from all over the nation, and the concerns and the discontent is growing here in California. And so one of our concerns that most parents have from the very beginning is, of course, the math, because their children come home with this crazy math that they're spending hours and hours on in the younger grades, and the parents don't know how to help them. And then they have to go either to the school and have the school teach them how to do it so that they can help their kids. And it's like more money out to teach the parents how to do the math as well. And so it gets really, really crazy. And I'm going to leave the math standards to the expert here, so I won't go into a lot more about that. All I know is that hear increasingly more and more discontent with the math standards. That seems to be the main thing that parents get hit with first. And once they start hearing and seeing these things with the math, then they start delving into more about the standards. And then they find out more things such as there's going to be less literature, and I'll let Dr. Stotsky talk about that. But one of the things, and I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on, is the data mining that's going to take place with all of this. Now, I am not going to imply that the Merced districts here are purposely doing something nefarious. I don't believe that at all. I think that in many cases, a lot of the school districts do not understand and know what's going to happen with the kind of data mining. I have a document here that was put together by the Pioneer Institute that's over 70 pages that talks about the data mining that's going to take place. And a lot of it's going to take place through the testing and also through surveys. And it becomes very concerning because then most people don't know also that the FERPA law, which is the Family Educational Privacy Act, was changed back in 2011 so that the information that is gathered on our children can now be shared with other people without parental consent. And nobody's talking about that. And that's very grave concern, especially in the day of age right now where we're hearing about things, about different organizations that are letting information get out to other people. And there's a lot of money that is involved in collecting data on our children. It is the money maker. It is what the different companies go after. And in the wrong hands, that information could be very, very detrimental. And so I would suggest that you be very careful about what you allow your students to answer on surveys and on tests at school. In fact, I don't know if you know, but in this state, we have the opportunity to opt our children out of this state testing and the surveys. There's an ed code 60615 that allows you to opt your children out of that testing and those surveys. It is your right to do that. Nobody can stop you from doing it. And so I would suggest you do that because it is important that your children get the opportunity to have their information kept private. And so it is very important. The other thing that I get very, very concerned about is the fact that we as districts have the right to whether we want to adopt the state adopted standards. Now, I don't know about your districts that you're in, if your school board was given the opportunity to decide whether they wanted to adopt the Common Core or not. My district, we were not given that opportunity. And so I find it very disconcerting that something where we're a local control state and we have that option, that we were not given that option to do that. And so I have major concerns about all of this. And it's concerning to me because we as parents are the primary educators of our children, and we get to make the decisions. Once the decisions get further and further away from the children and in the classrooms, then we have less and less control as parents. I say parents and teachers are the main educators of our children, and let's give them back that control. Thank you.
And now, thank you, by the way, Angela. Now, Julie Joseph.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. So I come to you from the Tulare County Office of Education, and I come to you with two perspectives. The first one is I am a mom. The little guy there just started kindergarten, and I am very excited about the education opportunities that he has ahead of him. I have a third grader, and I have a fifth grader. And all of them are outstanding math students, imagine that. But, you know, because that's what I do, is I torment them with math, you know, when we're driving and things like that, how long till we get there and those kinds of things. And so I keep a lot of the problem solving and a lot of the conceptual understanding in my home. What I'm excited for is as someone who loves math and who really wants to see all people be successful in math, is that those opportunities that my kids have with me and the knowledge base that I bring to educating them mathematically, is we are working to get that to all students so that all students can have that love and success for math, which is I feel like my mission in life is to help people not go through school saying, I'm not a math person, I can't do math, that math beat me down, that math made me feel stupid, because somehow we have done that to people, and that is not what math is about. It's a reasoning subject. We can understand math, but somehow we have allowed an education system where we don't really get in touch with the fact that all students are capable of learning mathematics. So I come here tonight because I have been working with Common Core for 3.5 years. In June of 2010, the standards came out, and I read them. And my colleague read them, and we said, wow, we've been talking about some of this for a long time, and we've been working with teachers on some of these strategies for a long time, and now it's actually in the standards. So if it's in the standards, they would feel like encouraged to try them instead of, Julie, it doesn't help me on my multiple choice test, so that's all a great idea, but I don't have time for that kind of stuff. So that was exciting to us, so we began a journey. And we began a journey as a county office to help teachers begin to understand the standards, understand the math underneath the standards, and to help kids be more successful. So in 2011, our first district started implementing K-1. They started K-1 because there was no CST. So they said, let's go ahead and get started. And so we have districts that are in there. They've been working at this for 3.5 years. So I come from a perspective of working on a daily basis with teachers. I was in a classroom today. I was working with students. And so it's not looking ahead as to what Common Core could be, but I can tell you from the last 3 years, what does it look like with students in classrooms? So let's look a little bit at the standards in mathematics. I know they get a lot of controversy. Teachers come to workshops and working with me, and there are a lot of questions, and I totally understand that, because there are some places where they read a little bit different, or they read a little bit long, or a little bit overly detailed, and so I want us to go ahead and take a look at exactly what they're talking about. So first of all, I want us to realize our purpose. Why do we want to upgrade the standards? Why do we want to get kids to be better critical thinkers, to be more numerate than they have been in the past? And it's because of those little people up there, which happen to be my family, but they're not all my kids, they're my nieces and nephews. But I want them, they're looking for those little 5-year-olds sitting on that little curb right there. They're looking ahead to jobs that we don't know what they're going to be. But we do know that they're going to need to be thinkers. We do know that they're going to need to be problem solvers. And we do know that they're going to need to be numerate. And so that is my goal, is to help them be prepared for the jobs that I can't really foresee that they will be taking in 20 years, 18 years, whatever the case may be. So in Common Core is really about 3 things. It's about problem solving, it's about conceptual understanding, and it's about procedural skill and fluency. Those are the same 3 things that were in the 1997 framework. They're in the first 10 pages of the document, and those are the first 3 things that we've been wanting in mathematics for a really long time. However, in our 1997 standards, they tended to be written a little bit more towards the procedural angle, and our CST test that we gave was very procedural. And so what ends up happening is we have math classes that look like memorization of long lists of rules. Today I'm going to teach you the 5 steps to factoring a polynomial. Tomorrow I'm going to teach you the 7 steps to solving this. And the next day I'm going to teach you the 3 steps to solving this. And you better make sure that you keep your steps straight, because in a month I'm going to give you a test, and you need to make sure you apply the right steps to the right problems. And for some of you, that may have been your math experience, and you want it out as soon as possible. The first year, the counselor said, can I get out of math? You were gone. And we don't want that, because math is actually a really engaging subject when we teach it as mathematics and not as things to be memorized. So in Common Core, what does it do different? It just asks that we're going to pursue all of those with equal intensity. It's not just about procedures. Procedures really do us no good if we can't solve a problem with them. And we aren't going to remember them if we don't understand what they are. And so they're asking us to have conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and problem solving, all of those with equal intensity. So what about the math content? Some of you maybe have gotten some funky homework home. Well, let me tell you, there wasn't a lot we could do with math content. We're still adding and subtracting in kindergarten through 2nd grade. We're still multiplying and dividing in 3rd through 5th grade, and we introduce fractions in there. We are working with ratios and proportions in 6th and 7th grade and some pre-algebra type content. And in 8th grade, we're doing linear algebra and linear functions. And so that content has stayed pretty consistent. The difference is we also want not just the skill, but can they solve a problem with it, and do they understand the mathematics underlying it? And so those are the content area expectations of Common Core. And in that process, we are also looking at, Common Core has implemented or set out for us, what are some math practices? What things do students need to do to be mathematical thinkers? And so you can see in this list that there are 8 identified. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. I would just love that for my children at home. Solve that problem. Persevere until you figure out how you're going to get your bed made, before we leave for church this morning. So those are the things I would like them to do. How about reason? Reason abstractly and quantitatively. How about construct a viable argument? And so those are things we would like kids to do. What I see in many math classrooms that I visit is the teachers doing all of those things and the kids are watching. They're making sense of the problems. They're constructing the viable argument. They're choosing the tool for the kids to use. And the kids are watching and taking notes. What Common Core is asking is at times the teacher is going to be giving information, but at times turn the problem solving over to the kids and let them solve problems. Let them use the information that they know and get it solidified in their head by actually putting it to use. So those are the 3 aspects of rigor as identified in the Common Core, and I am excited that that's the direction that we're heading in math education. I think we are going to see students that are coming out loving math, or at least maybe not hating it. I don't know, loving might be my dream, but at least maybe not hating it. And so I want us to take just a little bit of a look at what some of these things are, because I feel like some of us think this is brand new stuff. And so this is an example of a standard. It's detailed. I know it's detailed. When I work with teachers, I have to kind of break it down and go, I know this is saying a lot. But basically what it's saying is that kids need to add and subtract within 20. Awesome. And that there are efficient and inefficient ways. When kids first start, they count every single number, 1, 2, 3, and they count it all. And eventually they start counting on. Put the big number in your head and count on. And eventually they need to pick up more efficient strategies. So for just a second, I'd like you to think about this one. I know you didn't want to do math tonight. But what do you get when you add those 2 numbers? Awesome. So you get 96. How many of you stacked them in your head and added them? Okay, 1. Okay, that's what we spend hours and hours in elementary school teaching you to do. Why did you not do it? How many of you made 60? Yeah, you made 60 because that's easier than stacking them in your head and adding them. And so you thought about, what's the most efficient way for me to handle this? And that's what you did. And so I'd like us to think about, you made a 10. On Facebook, making 10 is not popular. It's like, you can't make a 10 out of an 8 and a 5. Well, you can't make a 60 out of a 59, but you just did. And so Facebook blasts this, and I kind of chuckle because I'm going, it was in your textbook before Common Core, and you didn't post it on Facebook. And now it's in your Common Core materials, but it's getting posted on Facebook. It's the same exact strategy that's been there for 15 years. So with that, I just want to encourage you to think about the questions you have, and I look forward to responding to those, and I look forward to what is in store for our students mathematically in California.
Thank you, Julie. And now, can we hear from Sandra Stotsky, Dr. Stotsky?
Thank you. And I thank you all for the opportunity to speak here to this very important group of parents and grandparents and others, because there have been many different groups that are forming and are finally, within the past 2 years, beginning to hear some of the information about Common Core's standards, the tests based on them, and the other policies that are brought into being as a result of Common Core standards. And it's very difficult for parents in particular to understand all of the strings that go with this project, but this will be just a start. Let me begin by indicating a little bit more about my background. I was, as many of you may know, in the Massachusetts Department of Education, where I was responsible for the development or revision of all of our K-12 standards in all major subjects. I was also involved here in California in the development of your own ELA standards. I know how good they were because I was involved in there as a consultant with the writing of those standards. I can unequivocally say that both the Massachusetts and the California standards that used to exist in ELA bear no relationship to Common Core's ELA standards, and that is a pity. There was a knowledge orientation, literary historical knowledge, in your old ELA standards, certainly was in the old Massachusetts standards, which were among the reasons for the number of base day students who rose in their achievement on NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress Tests, and in math and in science for their gains in achievement on the international test, TIMSS, T-I-M-S-S, that we enrolled in as a separate country. I would like to make a rather blanket statement that what we are looking at as far as the level of achievement by high school for Common Core is probably about 2 grades lower than what we have had in the past. These standards could not have been offered and sold if, of course, they in any way were being told to parents and others that they were lower. They had to be sold as though they were more rigorous and more advanced. And that is something that has, for reasons that go beyond my talk, something that needs to be explored, why an entire country of policymakers, particularly the 4 groups that were excluded from the participation in the development of these standards, and I'll mention those in a minute, were not able to have the opportunity which you now have today to start asking questions about what does college readiness mean and how can we tell what those high school standards in math and ELA actually mean. I have asked this of every group I have been to. How many here in this audience can read a set of high school math or English standards and tell what their grade level is? Very, very few. This is not uncommon. I'm lucky to find 1 person out of 150 in the audiences I speak to, and I speak to many, including those where I am testifying before state legislatures. They too do not know how to read a set of high school math or English standards to understand, or science standards, NGSS's new science standards, to understand what they mean for college readiness. Let me begin with just a few remarks about the background. The 4 audiences first that were left out. Remember, I was on Common Core's validation committee, and I was able to participate in various phases of the development of these standards. First audience was parents. They were nowhere to be seen. Second audience was teachers, particularly high school math and English teachers. They were nowhere to be seen on the 3 different groups that were formed for this project. I'll mention that in a minute. And then there were no state legislators on any of these committees, nor were there local school board members such as we have here. This was a pity. It was also probably deliberate as far as I can see. I had to ask as a member of the validation committee for at least one high school English teacher to be on that committee. What was the charge of the validation committee? It was to determine if Common Core standards were internationally benchmarked, rigorous, and research-based. I could find no evidence that they were, nor were we ever given the names of the countries to which we supposedly were internationally benchmarked or comparable to. So, and that remains after 5 or 6 years of talking about the lack of international benchmarking of the English standards. I will not talk about the math because Professor Milgram will say whatever he chooses to say about his involvement with the mathematics standards. I could never get a conversation going with David Coleman, who was the chief architect of the ELA standards. And as I have said in many other venues and will continue to say, we had people writing the ELA standards who were never qualified by any of their credentials to write ELA standards. I kept asking for a conversation with him while I was on the validation committee to find out why certain decisions were made. I would like to point out, if we could have the overhead that I have provided, just 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go through these quickly because I have testified and have on my homepage for the University of Arkansas provided so much written testimony that anyone wants details can go to my homepage. Missing standards you can see. The one that I think you should pay attention to is the second one in particular. No standard on British literature aside from Shakespeare, nothing before, nothing after, just a mention of 1 or 2 plays, and that's it. That is no way students are going to acquire knowledge. Those standards are, we can go down to the overall deficits, as you can see, they are mainly skills and they stress writing, not reading. My background is in reading research, graduate level work, and I have looked at what students do as well as what the standards require in terms of the numbers of objectives, and a stress on reading is backwards. As any good teacher knows, our students need to do more reading. We have had a decline in about 50 years in education. It wasn't caused by Common Core, it precedes Common Core, but Common Core has in no way addressed the decline in our students' reading skills. And a stress on writing is inappropriate because good writers have always been good readers, and we know that for about 100 years of reading research. The others you can see, and you can find this page as a handout to see. I should also mention, and this would have been a number 7, that early childhood educators have also created a petition right after Common Core's standards came out, complaining about the developmental inappropriateness of a good many of the primary grade standards. Nothing has changed in Common Core since it was released in July of 2010. It has remained on its own schedule to do what it intended to do, and that was to form the link to credit-bearing courses at the college level for those who pass the grade 11 college readiness test. I am going to finish with just 2 examples of what I have found on the 2 different major test consortia examples that they give. Smarter Balance has provided 1 grade 11 example among others that I think is very telling. One of the reading passages, and that's the only way you begin to get a sense of what college readiness means, one of the reading passages is from John Locke. It's 1 paragraph long. That is college readiness. And this is without knowing where the cut scores or the pass score is going to be set. For Park, one of the grade 11 examples that I just recently found were letters between Abigail and John Adams, focusing on their relationship. But letters are, in my judgment, not grade 11 or college readiness material. We have the wrong standards for college readiness, and they will indeed not be productive for a good many of our students. The literacy standards speak for themselves. Historians I have worked for, I'm going to finish my sentence and that's all, have complained that the literacy standards apply the wrong skills to the study of history. But that is, again, because the people who wrote the ELA standards were unqualified to write them and did not know that study of history involved other skills. So we have the wrong standards altogether. I'm not opposed to first-class standards. We just don't have them.
Thank you, Sandra Stotsky. Now for our duo, Joanna and Bliss.
My name's Joanna Conrado. I've taught 1st through 5th grade. I've been teaching for 17 years. I currently teach a 4-5 combination class and am the technology integration coach.
Hi, I'm Bliss Bosch, and I've been teaching for 14 years. I currently am a teacher on special assignment doing curriculum, and I help with instructional coaching in our district. And I think, you know, really we could sit here all night and talk about both sides of this, but are you guys ready to see what Common Core looks like?
If it works. Oh, it did. Sorry. What we'd like to focus on is what Common Core looks like at our school district. It doesn't mean that's what it's everywhere, but this is what we think it is. So first of all, it focuses on standards, not on content. As teachers in our school district, we have freedom to choose what resources we want to use that's appropriate for our students in each subject matter. It's project-based, cross-curricular connections with reading and writing being focused in all subject areas at all times. As teachers, we are facilitating learning, not standing up there just talking to our students. The students own their learning and work. It is data-driven, but it's data-driven for us to know where our students are at consistently so we can change how we're teaching. So we are making sure that we are providing them with the correct instruction for each student. It's based on collaboration. We want our students to be global citizens. We try to focus on authentic lessons, and we are trying to prepare them for future jobs that are not yet realized.
So we just have some examples for you tonight, and you know, with all of these things that Common Core means to us, these help foster teacher and student creativity.
So just real quickly, you can kind of read the slide. Common Core allows us, we're free to explore, experiment, think, and collaborate. We are free to ask questions and dig deeper, like how, why, and what if. And we are free to present our information in a variety of ways. And what you're seeing our students in my classroom doing a science lesson on force and motion and energy, and they learned about the subject matter, then they got to do hands-on experiments, they're making predictions, they're writing sentences about what they thought was going to happen, and the assessment piece of it was then they did a compare and contrast essay and a cause and effect essay about what the experiments were about.
And that's whiteboard paint on the tables, always fun. The next slide you see is just an example of a lesson that our 7th grade life science class did, and we kind of used some multiple web tools and standards in learning with this. The teacher used Edpuzzle to find and create videos that help build the background knowledge. The students watch a video and answer questions as they go through the series. All the little green question marks you see there are points within the video in which students have to stop and either think about something, answer a question, respond in some way. So that was kind of building the background knowledge for them. Then they used Oreos to create models of phases of cell division. And finally, they created a Google Draw that represents the models they had made with the Oreos. And they were asked to describe, draw conclusions, and answer questions based on their models that, of course, were aligned to the Common Core standards.
So I mentioned about its cross-curriculum activities as well as reading and writing and having students own their learning. So this is an example of students working together to learn about different explorers. Each pair were responsible for it. They did the research to find out about the explorer. They then created an infographic, which is a graphic with just a little bit of information on it to let you know what they were learning that they were going to share out with their other fellow classmates. They had links in that infographic to take them to videos and other websites. And then they then created a narrative to tell the students more directly about what those explorers were about by recording their voice over the slide so any student could listen to it at any time. We also mentioned about being global citizens. We are very much into, we want our students to not connect just with their fellow classmates, but with students in another schoolroom across the schoolyard, but also schools in other states as well across other countries and professionals. We routinely do what's called Skype in the classroom and have professionals join us across the internet and talk to our students, like give virtual field trips. And we are currently teaming up with another school district in another state where our students blog with each other and students get to read what other people are doing in their classroom. Some of the other things that we can do as well is collaborate and write a story together with a school that's in a completely another country.
Local assessment and accountability has not changed. We still have multiple measures, and we still use DIBELS. This might look familiar to some of you. It's K5, K6 actually reading assessment. And so these are things we're still using at the local level, finding many, many ways to assess our students to ensure that they are meeting standards. This is an example of a performance task that a third grade class did, and it brings some real world relevance to the task. It talks about planning a vacation and distance between cities. It asks them to write an answer in standard form and expanded form. They have to draw a place, they have to use Google Draw to draw the place value blocks using the shapes. So not only are kids answering these questions and performing tasks, but they're also meeting technology standards by having to create their own documents or their own draws. So not only are they using hundreds and tens and ones, they've created that within Google Draw. They've inserted the tables that you see there. They've created the squares of the hundreds, tens, and ones. They created the timeline. So lots of different ways that we're still assessing kids, just like we always have. This is an example of our 7th graders computer programming with a tool called Scratch. And so in this, we have a rubric where the teacher is able to grade as the student goes through and builds their program. The teacher can actually grade, and you'll see here that the teacher actually comments as to the different points in the rubric, and also is able to go in and highlight right on the document the areas of need or areas of success. This is an example of the student, what the student sees in the Scratch computer programming. And Scratch is a program that comes out of MIT. So this is just a few pictures of kids having fun learning, still meeting the standards, still being successful, and being extremely engaged and having fun learning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna and Bliss. And we're going to ask you if you've got those cards filled out, those questions. If you would, on this third, move it, pass them over this way. In the middle row, I guess you can all pass them that way as well. to that side and to this side. And we're going to collect them right quick. And we have one more speaker, thank you. And, but I want to make a quick chance for them to do that so we can give attention to our next speaker. One over there. Two. And there's a gentleman right over here also, I think. Did you have your card? Yes. You have a card as well? Okay. There's a lady right over here who has a card. 4 rows back on the inside. Hold it up so they can see it. There you go. Very good. That's it. And our last speaker for the 10-minute session is Professor James Milgram.
I have to say that I really like to listen to our teaching corps when they show us what they do. Always I'm impressed by how hard they work and by how dedicated they are, and they are so much better than we deserve given the extremely poor training that they get and the extremely poor working conditions that they have to live with. So, all right, that said, let me introduce myself. I'm not an educator exactly. I'm a research mathematician at Stanford. And I got involved in this education stuff, well, more or less by accident. But it's just my nature that once I get involved, I take these things seriously. So I've been a member of the National Board for Education Science, which is nominated by the President, confirmed by the Senate. This is the board that oversees all science education research coming from Washington. I've been the only mathematician who's ever served on the NASA Advisory Council, and I've had a number of other serious professional honors. One thing that's probably worth mentioning here is that I notice a lot of people are mentioning the 1997-98 California standards and telling you that the Common Core standards build on them and dominate them. There's a small problem with that. I and 3 of my colleagues were the authors of the 97-98 standards. And I don't agree with that assessment at all. I think the Common Core standards are, in mathematics, remarkably problematic. Now, I'm going to want to talk about that further, and so let me give you my my connections with the Common Core standards. I was selected as California's nominee to the validation committee, that Sandy and I served on, and our job, our charge, was to oversee these standards, validate the research that led to the standards being included, and writing ourselves standards that were missing and that we had research to show should have been in there. So basically, we were the people who were supposed to be in charge of completely overseeing the writing of Common Core. Now, so let me tell you a little bit about the internal situation that we faced in dealing with Common Core. Sandy has told you a little bit about what was faced with the English language arts standards, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the issues that we were facing with the math standards. So when we looked at the initial draft of Common Core's math standards in September of 2009, they stopped with Algebra 1. Now, the asserted claim for these standards was that they were to prepare students for college and the workforce. Well, there isn't a college in the country, a public university, a private university in the country that would accept a student whose only background was Algebra 1. So something was wrong here. Now, in my usual naive way, I said, something is wrong here. And I went over to the authors, to the lead writers for the writing team, and I said, something is wrong here. And I showed them the data that said, as I stated, that the standards, that if they stop here, there is no way a student can be called college ready. And so something has to change. And they said, well, we don't disagree, but we can't do anything. And I should have, at that point, realized that something was going on that was a little more complicated than what I would have thought. But I didn't. So I found out, okay, who do I have to talk to? Well, you have to talk to the people that achieve. So I talked to the people that achieve. More precisely, I screamed, but never mind. And I gave them the same data. I gave them the data. I showed them that even the best research that was done on these things by the National Mathematics Board that had met just a year or two previously, it didn't agree with what they were doing at all. That it showed that a full course in algebra, all the way through many of the topics, if not all, in Algebra 2, and geometry were essential. So I gave them all this. They said, and we'll think about it. And about a week, 10 days later, I heard from the authors that, well, hey, thanks. We now can write at least a weak geometry part and a weak Algebra 2 part. But unfortunately, they won't let us do more than that. Well, that one much better. The information, the detailed statistics on finishing with Algebra 2, doing Mathematics 2, Algebra 2, and that's where you stop, is that today 31 to 33% of students with that background will ever graduate with any kind of a degree from college. Now, that's not college ready. I mean, college ready says at a minimum, I give you a 50% chance. That doesn't do that. That says it's 1 in 3. And that doesn't even begin to answer the question, what about STEM? After all, Obama is going around saying you really have to adopt Common Core because it's the only way we're going to strengthen the STEM pipeline. And he says, hey, we got $4.7 billion for you if you do. Okay. Well, if you want to know the data for that background and majoring in STEM and ever getting a degree, imagine I have a student here whose last course in high school was Algebra 2, who wants to go into a STEM area, and he goes to the university or wherever, and do you know what his chances are of getting a degree in a STEM area? 2%. 1 in 50. This is not strengthening the STEM pipeline. This is destroying the STEM pipeline, and this is what we're looking at. Now, so, you know, it's sort of summarizing up and talking a little more about this. You know, what I'm hearing today are exactly the same words I heard in the early 1990s. The same description of the wondrousness of the 1992 standards is being used to describe the wondrousness of Common Core. The trouble is, the 92 standards were a complete disaster, and California's process is that back then at least that they chose the books, and the districts could only buy from a very selective list. When the 97 standards came out, we threw out that list and put in a brand new list. But guess what's back? What's back are all the programs from the 92 list. So we're hearing the same words, we're seeing the same things, and believe me, we're going to see the same results, a precipitous drop in our standards. And that's not what I think any of us want.
Thank you very much, Professor. Okay. Now we're going to take questions, and it will be 1.5 minutes on each side. They'll have an opportunity to answer the question. Are both related? And will students be allowed to research various viewpoints on a topic, or will they be required to report on the politically correct view and be expected to accept that that is truth? What happens if the student disagrees with the text, supplies information to pass? Will they be required to answer according to the beliefs of the Common Core test writers and not their own? Would you like to answer first over here?
Yes, I'll take a cut at that. Couple of things. The standards identify what students need to know and be able to do related to mathematics and literacy only. What districts choose to have their students read about, write about, provide presentations on, as was mentioned earlier, we are a local control state, and local districts choose all of those dimensions in their instructional program. The biggest focus in the literacy standards is to have students read widely and to more deeply understand what they read by finding evidence in the text to support their assertions. So the opportunity to make an argument on multiple points of view is well within the guidelines of what we would expect to see in classroom instruction and student work. They can choose multiple points of view, they can defend their argument, they can acknowledge that others might have differing points of view on any topics that are related to the developmentally appropriate content for those grade levels. So there's nothing about the Common Core that says they have to agree to any particular point of view.
Thank you. And on the other side, if you'd like to speak to the question, do you need it read again?
I would just say very quickly that we really don't know the answer to that question, and it will be very difficult for us to ever know the answer to the question, because the Common Core-based tests, so far as I know, most of the test items are not going to be released. This is very different from what took place in Massachusetts under the older standards and tests, where every year all the items used for assessing students had to be released so parents and others could see what was being assessed. This is not a policy that is going to be pursued with Common Core-based tests. There are security issues, I understand, and cost issues, but since it's computer-based for the most part, no one is, not even teachers are actually going to be able to see the actual test items to find out, never mind what the students have written, but what the test items themselves demand.
Very good. How can we stop this from going any further until it is tested and verified to be worthy of implementation? And we'll start on this side this time. Have it read again.
No, I think I understood the question. Well, of course, the problem is that as I tried to indicate to you, and I wasn't able to finish this, that in fact the validation committee, the actual input of the validation committee was essentially zero, because after this intervention of mine, within a week of that, the powers that be announced that validation had no longer any authority to question the standards or change them. That the only thing we were asked to do was to sign a letter saying they were excellent. And the problem with that is they weren't, and they aren't. And so how are we going to change this when we can't change it? I don't know the answer to that either.
Let me quickly add that there's no mechanism for revising these standards. Common Core was developed without any way to change the standards. And what I am recommending, and what several states now have for legislation that is going through various stages, is to simply reject Common Core, reject membership in any Common Core-based test consortium, and to choose committees that would develop first-class standards for the state. This is fraught with all kinds of issues, which I don't have time to go into here.
Thank you. Over here on this side, please.
So as I've been working with Common Core for the last 3.5 years, I've talked to lots of teachers that sometimes come in very wary, and you know, we start with something called a number talk, and let's have a conversation with your students and listen to their strategies about how they think about things. And I have yet to have a teacher come back to me and say, you know what, my kids couldn't do it. In every single case, they come back and they say, I could not believe what my kids were thinking. I had no idea. I was in a 3rd grade classroom today, and the teachers were looking at the kids as I was conducting a number talk with them, and they were like, I had no idea my kids had that thought process going on in their heads. And they were excited about what is happening with their kids' thinking. And so all I can speak is from practical experience, that it is good things are happening for kids.
I think it's important to remember that our legislature in California supported the adoption of the Common Core state standards along with our governor in August 2nd of 2010. Jack Connolly was the state superintendent. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who maybe he didn't know he signed a letter earlier, but he maybe didn't know he did a lot of things. So the degree to which, if you have concerns, you should first talk to your local school board, and you should talk to your children's teachers and their principal about what's happening in their classrooms. Our legislature, similar to what was mentioned earlier, that cost of $1.6 billion, our legislature put $1.25 billion into the schools, our taxpayer money, to support this implementation.
So is my microphone, it's over? It's well done. Thank you very much. This is 2 questions that were asked, very similar. Why is it when parents present school officials with the opt-out forms, they are told to take them to the district office? This says that parents, when they take the opt-out form to the principal, he doesn't know what it is. So we'll start on this side.
The school where we do testing, grades 3 through 8, is our district office, so I can't completely speak to that. Sorry.
The opt-out form is for, the legislation Ed Code mentioned is for taking the test. So parents have the right to give it to the principal or to the district office. Districts have the local decision to have the paper come to wherever they would like it to be. And so you just have to, if you're submitting it, you'll just have to find out what the district is doing and take it there.
I would recommend that you not only take it to the principal, but to the district office, and make sure that your children's teachers as well have that paper in hand, because a lot of times the communication breaks down. Not saying every time, but sometimes it does. And so I would make sure that every person who would possibly need to have that information, have that information. And the reason why that most principals don't know about what to do with that piece of paper is because most people didn't know that they had that right to opt their children out, and they have not done it before. And so we're making sure that we know, that we're letting parents know that you have that option. And we're going to make sure that we watch Sacramento, that they don't take that right away from us too.
Just let me quickly add to the point, because I have looked at the codes, the California codes recently, and not only do parents have a right to take their kids out or send them to school with a note saying they refuse to take any Common Core based test, they can... I just wanted to finish my statement that they can also request, if they wish, there's nothing that forbids them in the California Code, they can request that their child who goes to school have an instructional or teaching session while the child goes to school. In other words, they're not going to be declared absent for the day.
Thank you. And I hope there's no students here so that they see that they're going over the clock, and we want them to mind the rules here, don't we? Okay. So, please try to stay within that time limit, and no banter back and forth, please. How will Common Core affect the higher academic level students? How will they be challenged and separated for the average students? And that's along the same question here. Two people ask, how can one common track or curriculum apply to all students' learning levels and learning capabilities? And which side we're going to start on this side this time?
Well, the answer there is very straightforward. You can't. You can't. By the structure of these things, you're giving all of the kids the same material at the same time, and we even know how it's going to work. That is to say, what's going to happen is your top 10%, more accurately, probably your top 5 to 7, are not going to be really affected. They'll still do fine. What's going to happen is that the kids between the 30th percentile and the 93rd percentile are not going to do well at all. And that's just the way it's going to work.
The other side?
I can only speak to our school district. We definitely do individualized instruction. We, yes, have the ability of using technology at our school district. So we have a lot of programs that allow students to progress at their own rate, as well as encouraging students to strive for better. A lot of our projects, we allow students to take that ownership and choose how they want to present and do those projects. So students who are dedicated and want to do further and dive deeper in, they're encouraged to do so. The students who can't, we support them and encourage them to do the things that they can.
This question was addressed to the high school mathematics, but in case you had a concern about that, the high schools that I'm familiar with are having a pathway so that students can get to calculus. I know there was a concern expressed that students would not have the opportunity to take calculus because of the way the Common Core were written. And so there is a pathway that students will take the 3 years of math prior to calculus and then take calculus in their senior year, just as it currently is in most high schools. And so all of the high schools I work with are following that model because no high school teacher wants to see calculus leaving their campus and turning it over to the colleges. They want to keep up with the students with those high expectations.
Okay. This is a little bit confounding type of two questions here, but born of the same spirit. You say that this is about standards and not content, yet all you talk about is content and not standards. When I graduated, I had completed Algebra 2, Trig, as well as American Lit, British Lit, and World Lit. What are your standards and how are they better? I graduated in 1984. This one says, why does 6th grade Common Core math look just like my 1957 book? And we'll start on this side over here. I think is this side over here.
I'm thinking that one's going to be mine. So 6th grade Common Core math does have some similarities in the standards, and that ratio and proportional relationships are there, and they've been in 6th grade, I believe, apparently since 1957. I don't recall mean absolute deviation in that statistical analysis that is common, at least from the teachers I've worked with. They look at me like they haven't seen that before, so to say that the standards are exactly the same as 1957, I would say in error, but I don't even know. I think our first California standards were in 1997, so I'm not quite sure what was in the 1957 standards. It kind of predates me just a smidgen.
When I mentioned that we focus on standards and not content, what I kind of meant was I do not have to necessarily read a story that's in a publication or a publisher's book. That's content to us. That means I get to choose how I want to teach that standard. So I get to pick what story I want to read or how I want my students to participate, if it's hands-on or if it's a worksheet or if it's digital. That's what I meant by standards and not content.
And I would add, for example, in the literacy standards, right, we're talking about the capacity to read and write, about complex text, and then districts get to pick. So the standard is, can you find the main idea and details in a piece of complex text? What students read in order to demonstrate that is what it's all about.
Hello, can you hear me now? This side over here now.
I'll just say, without being a standards expert, is that in most cases the standards are written and the standards are supposed to help children figure out where we know where they're going to go. And in this case, the standards are going to be tested through the tests. And when the tests test the standards, then the teachers have to have the curriculum to be able to know how to help the children pass the tests. So they all kind of drive each other, and so you can't separate the two. Curriculum is different than standards, but they all are connected with each other, and so even though standards are specific and curriculum is specific, they all work hand in hand together. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
let me just add very quickly to what you've said. The Common Core-based tests in English language arts are going to be a kind of mystery until we actually have a sense of where the passages are coming from. There is nothing yet that I have seen in the test specifications that indicates the sources for the passages or their reading level, difficulty level, and until we have a better sense of what the reading level or difficulty level of at each of the grades of these reading passages and where they're being chosen from, it's almost impossible to know what the demands are going to be on children for reading purposes, because most of Common Core's ELA standards are skills. They have almost no content. Skill can apply to grade 3 as well as to grade 12.
Okay, thank you. Again, 2 questions, same question basically. After our personal information is gathered, family income, gun ownership, prescription drugs, etc., who is the data sold to? Now, why, and then the other question is, why is there so much data being collected in this program, and what will it be protected and used? And we'll start on this side right now.
well, I'll speak to that since I brought that up. The data, not just schools have always had to collect data on children. They have to have the address, they have to have their emergency numbers so that they know, they have to have medical information so they know how to treat children if there's an emergency at school. We all have to have that. The data that I'm talking about is more along the lines of the social and emotional learning aspects of things, where children are going to be asked, what would you do in this situation? Why would you do it? And then that information could then be put out to other people, other organizations. There are companies that kill for that data. They want that data because then they can use it for their own purposes to develop either products and or use it to, what's the best way to put this? Mostly to develop products, but there are other things that they could use it for. And it's open. We don't know who all could get that data because it's very open as to what the FERPA law says and who can actually get that information.
Very strict data safety issues. We do not collect data in schools about gun ownership. I'm not sure what school districts do that, but the expectations are that the privacy of information is held at the school and the district with access needed by teachers and administrators. And when students take the test, there's a numeric system that does not attach to a family name or a student name in order to be able to have the numbers that are assigned when students, for example, take the smarter balanced assessments on the computer. So this idea that we're selling the data, that's against the law in California. There is no school district in the state, in this state, maybe in other states, that does anything with their student data except use it to help inform instruction and communicate with parents and identify important necessary health needs for the students we serve.
Very good, and that completes the questions. And now we're going to have the 5-minute for each individual, except for the duo down here. And so I'm going to start in reverse. We went through Nancy, Angela, and Julie, and Sandra, and Joanne, and James. Now we're going to start with Professor James Milgram. You have 5 minutes?
Oh, I don't necessarily have much to say. You'll probably be relieved. But there is one thing I do want to emphasize here. As a matter of law in California, the standards have to be research-based, and they're not casual about it. They describe it properly as the research is reproducible. So the research that is required in California to approve standards has to be reproducible research at the highest quality. And there's no description that the standards have to be at the international level. So the fact, as far as California is concerned, that the core standards are 3 years, by the time you finish high school, between 3 and 3.5 years behind international expectations, so that you can imagine the difference in if you have two people fighting for a job, one of whom has 3.5 years more education than the other, you can imagine how the other is at a real disadvantage. But again, that is not part of California's rules. So the only question that we can ask about the standards is, are they research-based? And that's what I tried to emphasize when I described what actually went on in the sole commission that was responsible for verifying that they were research-based. That they are not research-based, not remotely research-based. Indeed, some of the courses, such as geometry, the only research data we have on that is that it was a spectacular failure in a very, very large country, the old USSR, when it was introduced, when this program was introduced in the 1970s. So the only data we have on the geometry is that it is not, the research is that it doesn't work. Now, somebody mentioned, and I think this will be my final thing, somebody mentioned as ratio and rates in 6th and 7th grade as an important component of Common Core. well, it is a very important component. The trouble is, it's filled with major mathematical errors in Common Core. And there aren't many major mathematical errors in it, but that's where they're focused, is there, and there's some major errors in the discussion of linear algebra and vectors. But you know, so you've got all these problems with the quality of the document. It's never been piloted. It's never been tested, and I think, frankly, that it's illegal. That the standards the minimal standards that California has set for standards are not met by this document.
Thank you. Next would be Joanna and Bliss.
I'd just like to say I'd like to invite any of you out into our district anytime to come see what we're doing and be able to argue that Common Core is wrong. Come out, join us, you know, at the classroom level, because that's what we're all really here for tonight, is to see what students are doing.
I think our teachers in the school district are very happy to teach Common Core. It has given us our freedom back. I've been teaching long enough to see things come and go in education, and I have a voice again. I get to say what I want to do in my classroom as long as I can prove that my students are learning. I can have them do many different things, and I get to have fun exploring learning with my students again, and our numbers for our students coming to school kind of prove that. Our ADA is way up. 1/3 of our population is inter-district transfers because they enjoy coming to school at our school district. And we do not have discipline problems at our school. Our students are happy and they are learning.
And now, Sandra Stotsky.
Let me say very briefly that there needs to be a complete revision of whatever the state standards are in just about every state of this country. And it would begin with what I have learned from my experience in the past year with Oklahoma, Indiana, and now Ohio and North Dakota, all of which are among the states that are trying to get out from under Common Core with different kinds of legislation. First thing I think that has to be established with any group or committee that tries to start this project is that the locus of control has to be elsewhere than a Department of Ed or a Board of Education or a Commissioner of Education. I would ideally suggest that higher education, mathematics, science, or engineering departments or English language or literature departments be where the chairs come from. There has to be in such bills that are specified to avoid problems that have now been emerging, that you get locus of control somewhere where you have people with the knowledge of the content that has to be in these standards. Secondly, there has to be a way to ensure that the people who get on these committees to revise these standards know the content of whatever they're trying to establish. I was just visiting Missouri, and there was a teacher of culinary arts on the English Language Arts Standards Revision Committee. Have no idea how she got there, but this is part of the governor's plan to get back Common Core after supposedly getting rid of it. Third and final thing is that the final standards that are developed should go to the state legislature for final approval. At least that's where ultimately the people should be held accountable. That's the best I can come up with what is a very sticky issue.
Thank you. Julie Joseph.
Again, my perspective is as someone who has been working with Common Core for a few years and is really passionate about helping us develop mathematical thinkers in our society and problem solvers. And so that is my perspective, and I just want to end with a little story. So I am working with a teacher. I've worked with her for many years, and she used to teach 2nd grade, and she went to 4th grade. And so we were talking about Common Core and planning for Common Core implementation last year, and she wasn't very comfortable with it. She didn't make any, excuses for it, or, like she didn't try to hide it, She just was like, I don't really see it, Julie. I don't really, think that anything needs to be different than what it currently is. I can't really get my head around it. So this year she got moved back to 2nd grade after being out of that grade level for about 3 years. And she said the other day, not to me, but to a colleague, she said, I didn't think that I wanted Common Core, she's all, but I just got a group of 1st graders that spent last year doing Common Core, and again, she was amazed with what they could do. And it wasn't the magic of the standards themselves. It was the teachers bringing to the standards the visual models, the reading the standards for the details of the concepts that kids need to develop, and realizing that if we teach kids to truly help them develop understanding in an age-appropriate way, that they can do great thinking, and they're going to be able to build a lot of mathematics on that strong foundation that they've felt. So I realize some of you are kind of sitting in the same place she was and going, I really don't see it. I really think it was just fine the way it was. But I would say that, let's actually get in there and give it a shot and see if it can't be better for our mathematical thinkers and problem solvers than it has been in the past.
And Angela Weininger?
Well, if I could close with one final thought on all of this, is that I want you all to remember that you as the parents are the #1 in charge of your children. You are the ones that sit around the kitchen table with your children and see the frustration and have to try to work through the things that they're frustrated with. And you need to keep your voice. Keep speaking out, whether it's talking to the teachers, going to the principal, going to your school boards, writing to your state legislators, and letting them know that you're not happy with this if that is the case. Keep your voice. Do not allow it to go away, because they are your children and you are the most important person in their lives. And so if I were to give any last advice, that's what it would be. Keep your voice, and you are the primary caregiver and educator of your children. Thank you.
And Nancy Brownell.
Thank you for coming out on this evening away from your family and home to listen to the conversation. On the sort of closing comments, there were 27 brilliant thinkers and educators and teachers and researchers on the validation committee. 25 of them signed off on the expectations for, remember, we're not supposed to intervene. If you Google the validation committee, you'll find the 27 members. So the degree to which we have a difference of opinion across many states. In California, we are moving forward to try to take a look at how do we prepare students to go forward with a wide range of skills and knowledge that'll help them prepare to be good citizens in the 21st century, leaders, students, opportunities to engage in the civic life of our country. The University of California A through G requirements, expectations for high school courses include a traditional pathway, as someone asked, algebra, geometry, trig, calculus. It also includes an integrated math pathway. Under the 1997 standards, within the 2000s, we required in our state that every 8th grader take algebra. Every 8th grader took algebra, and districts were punished through their API if they did not enroll students in algebra. 60% of them students failed algebra because they were required to take it in 8th grade before they had the prerequisite skills to really do well. And then they had to take it over again in 9th grade, and many of them had to take it over again in 10th grade and finally said, forget it. I'm destined to not know mathematics. We're trying to reverse that course. I do believe that the changes to the SAT and the ACT tests for college entrance are going to be focusing on the expectations of the Common Core. In our state, in grade 11, we've had the early assessment system for 10 years that really gave an indicator to parents across our state. As juniors in high school, you are conditionally prepared for college, or you may need to take some additional things in 12th grade. So when we look at the folks who have been involved in California through the progression of the last few years, the opportunity to move ahead to help students become better thinkers and demonstrators of learning, we're really trying to look at what's a realistic alignment across pre-K through 12 and to provide lots of opportunities for students to demonstrate what they know, both at the end of the year, smarter balanced assessment, but more importantly, all through the year, through good feedback from teachers, through problem-based learning, through opportunities to demonstrate using technology. In our state, right now, we have lots of opportunities for parent involvement through the local control funding formula, to be engaged in the work in your local community, and to try to help us all work together as a team to really build on the success that our students are going to need. And I think lastly, the idea that my 5-year-old grandson should be receiving mathematics instruction that I received 60 years ago doesn't make any sense to me. The idea that in most professions over time we learn much more about how to do our jobs better, and in the teaching profession we've learned a lot about standards-based instruction in the last 10 years, and we're really poised in California to move ahead, I think, in a much more sophisticated way. So again, the opportunity to work with your children and your grandchildren to help them really understand that grit and perseverance and tenacity are a lot of what being a good student is about. And that takes lots of effort on their time. And we're going to ask them to exercise their reading and numeracy powerful brains in a different way, perhaps, than some of us learn. But it's all to help them really engage at a much deeper level in the important learning that we have going on in schools.
Well, thank you, panel. And now I'd like to introduce the coordinator of this panel discussion. It's so nice to have it here in Atwater, and a great place to be. And so I'd like to introduce Barbara Reese Christensen.
I would like to thank our committee Unveiling Common Core, our panelists who have come a long way for this forum, and for Dr. Gomes. His co-sponsorship of this community event made this all happen. And also, I thank all of you for coming here and listening to the forum. Thank you very, very much. I hope everybody got something out of it.